pleasure to introduce Dr. Don Thomas for National Engineers Week as our distinguished lecturer. And Dr. Thomas is a veteran of 4 space shuttle missions. He is a Cleveland native. He graduated from Case Western with a degree in physics. He has a master's and PhD in materials physics from Cornell. And he did a few stints at different places, including Bell Labs, Lockheed in Texas, and he also reviewed materials used in the space shuttle payloads. In 1991, he became an astronaut. I think he was invited for the astronaut candidate group in 1990 and began his career in 1991. And since then, he, as I said, participated as a mission specialist in 4 different space shuttle missions. He has orbited the Earth about 700 times and spent about, he traveled about 18 million miles around the Earth. And he currently is the director of the Hackerman Academy for Mathematics and Science at Towson University. And it's my pleasure to welcome him, and please join me in...
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? If I stand here? Yeah. Still picking it up? Well, great. It's a great honor for me to be here, and I appreciate the invitation to come up and speak tonight. As you heard, I went around the Earth about 700 times, but I want to start off by confessing that I slept through about 1/3 of those, so don't be too impressed. And I got to spend about 44 days in space during my missions, and I tell people, you get to go around the Earth once in your lifetime. It is amazing to see our planet. And I've had the chance to go around many, many times and see things around our planet. I'll share some of those with you tonight. And what I want to do tonight is just take you on a mission with me to tell you a little bit about the space shuttle and what it's like to live and work up there. And we'll show you some pictures of the Earth as well. Hold on a second. Houston, we have a problem. Okay, I always start with this picture. This is not a picture of me, but it very well could be me. I was in kindergarten when the first American went into space. And it's almost embarrassing to tell you that that was nearly 50 years ago. May 5th coming up will be the 50th anniversary of Alan Shepard's first flight on a Redstone rocket. He had a 15-minute flight, just suborbital, went up and down like a cannonball. And at my elementary school in Cleveland, Ohio, they brought everybody to the school gymnasium. We sat there on the floor. We watched a small black and white TV of the launch. And after watching that, I just said to myself, I want to do that. It was the day before my 6th birthday. I had no idea what astronauts really did. Didn't know how to become an astronaut. Didn't know what was involved with any of that. But I knew what I wanted to do. And this, I really credit that moment. I don't know what educator or administrator had the idea to bring us all down and make us watch that. But it really changed my life. From a young age, I knew what I wanted to do. The next year, when I was in 1st grade, they launched John Glenn, and he was the first American to orbit the Earth. And again, we watched the launch on TV. I went back to my classroom that day, and my desk was right along the windows. And I remember the rest of the morning, after watching the launch, instead of listening to the teacher, I was looking out the window, hoping to see John Glenn passing over Cleveland, Ohio. And little did I know he wasn't going to pass over Cleveland, and even if he did, I wouldn't be able to see him. But I just want to impress upon you, this is what I wanted to do since I was a little kid. And I didn't know how to get there, but I knew I better do well in school, so I always tried to do my best in all my classes. In elementary school, I was like a B student. I got a few A's and a few C's, but mainly B's. In middle school, I was doing better, getting A's and B's, and by the time I hit high school, I got nearly straight A's. I was never the smartest person in my class, but I worked really hard. And I got those grades through a lot of hard work. So I learned really early on in my life, how to work hard and how to achieve things through that hard work, even though I might not be the smartest person in my class ever. I have a twin brother, a fraternal twin. I think this guy's a genius. He didn't have to work hard at all. I used to have to bust my butt to get A's and B's, and he would just kind of glide through it. But I learned how to work really hard, which is a great skill to have. So after high school, I went on to Case Western Reserve University, got my bachelor's in physics, and that's the minimum degree that you need to become an astronaut. But that's just the minimum, and I knew the competition's pretty keen, and that a bachelor's degree, that's the minimum, but probably not sufficient for what I would need. So I decided to go on, see if I can get my master's degree, and I went to Cornell in materials engineering and got my master's degree, and then I said, wow, I got my master's, let me just continue on and see if I can get my doctorate. And after about another 2.5 years, I got my doctorate, and I was just amazed. You know, I was like 26 and a half, 27 years old, got out of Cornell, and took a job at Bell Labs in Princeton, New Jersey, not far from here, working as a materials engineer on semiconductor packaging. And I did that for, you know, a number of years, and it was about that time that I got out of Cornell, starting there at Bell Labs, that they started flying the shuttle in the early 80s, and I started sending my application in to become an astronaut. And the first time I sent it in, you know, it's a fairly short application, sent that in and just sat back and waited, and I was pretty confident. I thought, you know, I'd gone to good schools, I was working for a great company, they're going to pick me. And it was a couple of months later, I was reading the New York Times, and there was a little article in there, and it said, the headline was, NASA selects 15 new astronauts. I thought, well, that's odd, they didn't call me. And I quickly read the article, and my name wasn't on the list, and that's when I realized this was going to be a lot harder than I ever thought it was going to be. 2 years later, there was another astronaut selection. Sent my application in. And this time I got a little postcard back. It was like a form letter. It said, Dear Sir and or Madam, thank you very much for your interest. We had a lot of good candidates. We didn't select you, but good luck in the future. And I just looked at that postcard and I said, you know, my grandmother and I have the same chance of getting in there. You know, it's like 0. And I don't know, I was a little frustrated by it. I felt like they're not even looking at me. You know, I was just somewhere in the noise there. So I decided I got to do more. I got to try to break out from the pack. And I started focusing on whatever I thought would help. You know, if you know how to fly a small plane, that helps like about this much. And so I figured I'm gonna start doing that. I went skydiving, learned how to do that because that helps this much. Went scuba diving, that helps this much. Taught a course up in Trenton State College up there, you know, that helps this much. And my philosophy was, well, maybe I can do enough of these little tiny things that in the end I'll be head and shoulders above some of the other candidates. A lot of it I can't control, but there were some things I could control. So I tried to optimize everything that I could. I was doing those things. There was another astronaut selection, sent my application in, and this time NASA invited me to Houston for 1 week of medical tests and an interview. And out of the thousands of people that apply for each of the selections, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 4,000 or 5,000 people, NASA whittles it down to 100. They invite them to come to Houston for mainly medical tests all week, and then there's a 1-hour interview. And the medical stuff is just pass-fail. It doesn't matter how many push-ups you can do or sit-ups. It's do you pass the test or not? And I passed the physical, and then went into the interview stage, and the interview's 1 hour, and there's about 10 people, 12 people interviewing you at one time. 1-hour interview. I was so nervous before that interview. I'm sitting outside the conference room, and you know, I'm waiting for them to call my name, and they open the door and they said, Don, we're ready for you. Butterflies are all over my stomach flying around. I was so nervous. But when they said, hey, we're ready for you, I almost had a peace come over me. And it was like, this was my shot at telling them why I want to be an astronaut, why I would be a good astronaut for them. So I walked in there, took a deep breath, and had a great interview. Thought it went really well, and went back to Princeton where I was living, and I just sat back and waited. And I was there for about 2 weeks, and some of my friends started calling me from around the country. And they said, hey, Don, the FBI's been calling about you. And let me tell you, if the FBI's calling about you, it's either really good or really bad. In this case, it was really good. They were doing a security background check on me. And they went way back to high school. Anybody I ever worked for from high school on, they went and talked to the employer. They talked to former workers. They talked to every place that I ever lived, any apartment, house that I rented, anything like that. They talked to the landlords. They talked to neighbors in the neighborhoods that I lived. They would walk up and down the street looking for people who may have some dirt on me. You know, they're just trying to learn all they can about you. And I thought, this is a great sign. They can't possibly be doing this security check on all 100 people that interviewed. I must be in that final group that they're considering. So I was really excited. And it was a couple weeks later, I got a call from NASA, and they said, Don, thank you very much for applying. We had a lot of good candidates. We didn't select you this time, but good luck to you in the future. And I hung up that phone, and I cried for about 10 minutes. I was just devastated by that. Because here they had looked at me, and they said, no, no thanks, rejected me. And so I figured at that point, I got to get on with my life. I can't be chasing this silly dream my whole life. That I got to get on with my life and figure out what I'm going to do. And figured I'll go to bed. Next morning I'll get up and I'll craft a new course and decide what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I was about 32 years old or so at that point. Went to bed that night and got up the next morning, and the very first thought through my head was, I still want to be an astronaut. So I decided I'm leaving Bell Labs and I'm moving to Houston, and I got a job as an engineer working on the shuttle program. Because I had seen the numbers, and out of the civilians that they were selecting for the mission specialist position, you know, most of them already worked at NASA. And I'd been trying to get into NASA for years, and they had hiring freezes and other things going on. And this time I said, well, I got to get in one way or the other. So I started with Lockheed Martin, one of the contractors there, and took a job there. Everybody at Bell Labs thought I was nuts. They said, what are you doing? You know, I was about to get my 3rd week vacation. You know, and I was walking away from the job. I was just about to get vested in the company for retirement, and I was walking away from it. And they said, you're nuts. I said, I got to chase this dream of mine. I got to do this. So they kind of understood that, but I know behind my back they were laughing at me, thinking this guy's nuts. And so I moved to Houston, got a job as an engineer there. 2 years later, there was another astronaut selection, and got interviewed, made that final 100. And went through the medical tests. The medical stuff went fine. The interview didn't go as well as that first round. I thought, boy, I could answer that question better, and I could have done this better. So I wasn't too optimistic, and it was about maybe 2 months later I got a call from NASA, and they said,